Hello, welcome to the Is It Just Me podcast. I am your host, Dr. Angie Ange. This podcast will entail truthful, transparent conversation about everyday life and the lessons learned. This podcast is for everyone from teenagers to the elderly. Although some topics may be rated R, every topic is based on living life and learning life lessons. Today, we're going to talk about being the bigger person versus being petty patty. And before I start each episode, I like to state this disclaimer that I am not an expert, and everything discussed in this episode is the independent opinion and reality of myself. When it comes to situations with friends, family members, relationships, there are times when dealing with certain situations and certain individuals where you have to decide if you should be, quote unquote, the bigger person or stoop to their level and put your petty pants on and be petty. And I call that petty patty. The question becomes, should you always go high and be the bigger person? Or are you a person who decides to be petty patty all the time? Now, of course, this is going to be based off of my opinion and my life experiences, but I know there has been one time or another in most people's lives when we have or had to be petty at one time or another. Whether the situation called for it, whether you were tired of being the bigger person, whether you're just a petty individual, but at one time or another in most people's lives, they have chosen to be petty. And before we can discuss what is was considered petty, we have to really define what petty is. And according to the dictionary, petty means little or of minor importance, not serious. And when the terminology of petty is used, most people refer to being petty as being immature. And when you think about it and you think about the individuals that you're surrounded or your family members and you think of that one person that you know that's always petty, then you sit back and you start to reflect and analyze certain things and you're like, yeah, they're very immature and that's probably why they're so petty, or that they have double standards, or they're the type of individual that see no wrong in anything that they do. But pettiness is often attributed to underlying insecurities of a person, and it's carefully hidden behind false assertiveness, which surfaces when things get tough or when another person challenges their complacency. And I always say it comes a time in everyone's life when you have to be petty, because being the bigger person all the time, sometimes it doesn't get you anywhere, because sometimes people try to take your kindness for weakness, and it makes you feel as if though you're always choosing the high road. Because you're always choosing the high road, people are going to continue to play in your face. And I'm a firm believer in, I'm checking shit at the door. I'm not letting nobody play with me. You're not playing in my face. If it's an issue or something that arises, I'm going to speak on it. And not every time that you speak on something makes you petty. And not every time that you speak on something makes you the bigger person. It all is based on the situation at hand and what requires you to be petty. And I always say, I'm not a petty person. Have I been petty and done petty things? Of course. But I'm not an individual who's a petty person. I'm not a tit for tat petty person. I'm not a, oh, you did that to me, so I'm going to do that to you. Or you, so what? You know, I'm stupid to your level and I'm always going to be petty. But there have been times when people really tried to play in my face. So it was like, oh, you want to play? So I'm going to give you a taste of your own medicine and I'm going to show you what it is to be petty. Now, I'm to the point now in my life where I don't have any drama. I'm in a safe space. I don't have any real issues with anyone. I just leave people where they are. But in my relationship and my friendships, we always don't agree on things. And there comes times when we might have a disagreement or an issue or a back and forth debate. And when we have those debates and those issues, I tend to not try to be petty, because I value the relationship that I have and I value the relationship with the individuals as my friends that I have. So I don't take it there to be petty. Now, if it's somebody who is just fucking irking my nerves and just aggravating me, like, see, it could be a distant relative, because I don't really associate with anyone else. But if it's a distant relative or someone who's not in my immediate circle, but they have a relationship with someone, so they're around because we share a relationship with someone. And it's like you constantly and continuously being petty. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's time for me to put my petty drawers on, and now I'm going to be petty back. But for individuals who are constantly and always petty, being petty is basically like an interpretation of your word, seeing the word from someone else's view, overreacting without getting all the facts straight. They feel like everybody is going against them when technically it's not, because everybody is not going to agree with you. You're going to have disagreements. That's life, that's reality. But basically, pettiness stems from insecurities of feeling disappointed. You have individuals who always want to be surrounded by yes men and yes women. Those individuals have hidden insecurities within themselves to whereas they don't want to be around anyone who's going to give them the real, who's going to let them know the other side of the situation. They just want individuals to always agree with them because agreeing with them fulfills their insecurities. When you disagree with them, now they feel insecure and they feel less than or they feel challenged, and that becomes an issue. So they become petty. I always say this and I live by this. At a certain age, being petty is miserable. You can't go through life all the time being petty because at some point it's misery. I'm not always saying that you always have to take the high road and you always have to be the bigger person. But it comes a time in life where stooping to pettiness, tit for tatness, oh, I'm not doing that because she didn't do that for me, or I'm not going because she didn't come for me, or just basic petty shit. It comes a time to where it equates to being miserable. And a lot of individuals who are petty, of course, they're not going to sit back and they're not going to admit that they're miserable. And most of them are not going to admit that they're petty. You have a few people that'll be like, oh, but you know I'm petty. And it's like, that's not cute. How old are we? Like, we're not in our teens and in our early 20s. At some point, you have to put your big girl drawers and big boy drawers on and handle situations without being petty. So there are certain instances where being the bigger person doesn't always work. And I get sometimes you got to give what people give you. If you constantly being a bigger person and you constantly trying to avoid conflict and you constantly trying to make things, with no drama and just live peace. But this certain individuals keep wanting to be petty. Sometimes you have to stoop to their petty level just to show them that I could be just as petty as you and don't fucking play with me. So I get it. But I'm not Michelle Obama. When you go low, I'm not going to go higher. You go low, I'm going straight to hell on your ass because it gets to a point to where people know exactly what the fuck they be doing. They know what the fuck they be saying. So just because you think that I'm always going to take the high road, you feel like you can say what you want to say to me, and it's going to be like, oh, well, she's going to forgive me, or I just said that because I was mad. And it's like, no, because now I'm going to make you stand firm on what the fuck you said, and now you're the one that's going to end up being mad because I don't mistreat people, and I'm not allowing anybody to mistreat me. And being petty and that back and forth and saying things when you're upset, but then after you think about it, it's like, oh, I really didn't mean that. It's like, we're not doing that. We're old enough to be able to have a conversation. If we have a disagreement, to have a disagreement and agree to disagree and move on. If you're still at that point to whereas you always feel that you're being petty, I think you need to self-reflect and sit back and figure out what hidden insecurities or what issues it is that you have to deal with why you feel so insecure. Where if someone challenges something that you say or someone disagrees with what you say, that you feel disappointed or you feel like there's an issue. Just a disagreement doesn't always equate to an issue. Everybody have a difference of opinion. Because me and your opinion is different doesn't mean that me and you have an issue. We just have different opinions on that issue. I always say that sometimes you got to give people what they give you. But in being the bigger person all the time, you tend to always take the high road. And then people really start to feel like, oh, she's always going to be the bigger person or he always going to be the bigger person so I could play with you. No, I'm not telling nobody to always be the bigger person. There are times when it's like, you know what, you can be the bigger person. But then there are times when it's just like, I got to stoop to petty level. So now I got to put my petty panties on and we're going to be petty. When an individual consumes their self with being petty, it's more so like a negative thing. They have a lot of negativity that they're surrounded by, and they don't have any individual that's going to sit there and check them to let them know that being petty is not the way to go. We all have been petty at one point in our life, but to constantly and always want to be petty, it's just like, yeah, no, it makes absolutely no sense. And being petty all the time at a certain age is definitely misery. If you're focusing on the positive things and the relationship that you have with the people, okay, you had a disagreement. Like, okay, we had a disagreement. It's not the end of the world. You can feel how you feel, but let's get over it and let's move on. If you fill your brain with giant dreams, There's no space for petty pursuits. And when I say with giant dreams, I'm not being facetious. I'm saying there's other things bigger than being petty. So if you fill yourself with the bigger, more significant things, you don't have time to be petty. And with you not having time to be petty, you're filling yourself with bigger pursuits and bigger things. So therefore, that pettiness is no longer there. I always say it's inevitable that you have to deal with a petty individual, but it gets to a point where as we as individuals, we have to stop letting people who do so little for us control so much of our mind, feelings, and emotion. If a person is not directly connected to you like all the time, it's not a good friend, a close friend, it's not a family member that you have a good relationship with. If it's not someone that you have a consistent relationship with, there's no need for you to even have to stoop to the level to be petty with that individual because they don't even matter. They shouldn't matter. We as humans, and I have been guilty of it as well. So I'm not going to say you, I'm going to say we, because there have been times when I have allowed individuals to make me put my petty panties on and go straight to hell. But in my defense, I've tried to be the bigger person a lot of times, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And I'm to the point to where as now, whatever you give is what the fuck you gonna get from me. So if you give petty, I'm going to check you, check it right there, then and there. You could call me petty, you could call me whatever you want, but you're going to get it right back. You can't continuously walk around being petty to people and treating people how you want to treat them and think that they're still going to treat you good. That's not how life works, and that's not realistic. And who the fuck do you think you are that you could just mistreat people and say what the fuck you want to say and walk around and be petty all day and still think people are going to be genuine to you? Like, are you fucking stupid or are you dumb? That's the real question that you should be asking yourself. Like, who the fuck do you really think you are that you could walk around mistreating people, talking to them how you want, being disrespectful, and you think that nobody is supposed to give it back to you? It doesn't work that way. And if you're a petty person, why are you mad because somebody's being petty to you? You're petty. So if somebody's being petty to you, what's the problem? Because clearly there's an issue with being petty, but you don't want to accept the fact that you're petty. You don't want to own up to your shit and take accountability for your pettiness. So when someone does it to you, it's a problem. You can't be mad when someone pulls a you on you. You did it to them. Why you mad if they did it to you? I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier. At a certain age, being petty equates to misery. And if that's the case, and you walk around and you highly say, oh, because you know I'm petty, you need to sit down, self reflect, and really realize why is it that you're that petty person? What insecurities are you trying to hide from other individuals that you don't want them to see why you're petty? What are the people around you that you claim that you're petty to? What in you are they challenging? What are they bringing up? What old feelings are they bringing to the surface that you don't want to deal with? Why you feel like you have to be that petty person? Because we all have been petty at some point in our life. But I'm speaking on my age bracket. If you're 40 and up and you somewhere proud about being petty, you need to sit back and self-reflect on the type of individual that you are because that's not a positive attribute to have. That's not a positive characteristic to say, oh, I'm petty. Who you think want to be surrounded by somebody that's petty? It's like when shit really matters and shit really hits the fan. Do you want to be known as the person that was the petty person, or do you want to be known as a person that had integrity, good morals, a stand-up person, loyal? You don't want to be known as petty patty because people are going to give you exactly what you gave them, and then you're not going to like it. You can't get mad at someone pulling a you on you if that's the individual that you are. If you hold to a high regard that you're petty, why you mad because somebody else is being petty to you? Being the bigger person, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I do understand that there are times when you have to stoop to a person's level and you have to show them the pettiness in you as well. Like, okay, I can bring the pettiness out also. It's not in me, but we're not gonna keep doing this. I'm gonna check this shit. We're gonna check it at the door. It's gonna be what it is, and we're gonna move on. And sometimes a petty individual, they'll have some situation and it'll be something that's so fucking minute that doesn't even require the reaction that you get from that person. But because they're so fucking petty, they'll let the shit linger and go on, and then they'll be mad for 3 months, and then they'll think that when they come back and they're not mad 3 months from now, like everything is supposed to go back to how it was. And it's like, no, that's not how life works, and that's not how it is. If that situation, which was so fucking petty, required you to not want to speak to me for 3 months, then you might as well not speak to me for the rest of my life, because certain situations don't require me not to speak to you for 3 months because we had a disagreement, or because I said something that you didn't agree with, or I didn't agree with your opinion on something. At a certain age, being petty is miserable. And if you show me that you're miserable, I don't want to be your company. So I'm going to treat you accordingly, and I'm going to move out the way because you're moving funny. Nobody has time for that. It's like the older you get, you're supposed to not just grow old, you're supposed to grow. And I don't want to be surrounded by anybody who's not growing. I don't want to be around petty individuals. And I'm not trying to say that I don't know people that have done petty things. Like, again, I've done petty shit, but I'm not an individual that's going to always choose to be petty in a situation. You have to sometimes self-reflect, and this is going to go back to one of the episodes that I did prior. You have to really realize, are the people that you're surrounded by are high quality people or not? Because high quality people don't want to be petty. So, are you surrounded by high quality people that's gonna accept that me and you don't agree on the situation, and move on, and we still have conversations like every day? Or are you gonna be surrounded by low quality people who hold on to little misunderstandings for 2 years and then think when they see you it's supposed to be back to normal? I don't want to be surrounded by low quality people, and low quality people are petty individuals, and I choose not to be surrounded by them. And I choose to be petty sometime when it's called for it. But when you are the bigger person, people do tend to try you more because they feel like you're going to be the bigger person. But being petty is not the way to go. It's not a good characteristic to have. And it's just like, sometimes I do get, we got to stoop to the level of that person for them to understand. Don't fucking play with me. But being petty is not the move. It signifies, and this is my opinion, it signifies that you're very miserable and you have some things that you need to work on. We really need to stop allowing people who do so little for us to control our mind, feelings, and emotions. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Is It Just Me podcast. Hope you tune in next week, where we're going to talk about gossip and rumors.